Nope. Good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals Public Review Session for February 23rd, 2015. We'll begin with a special order calendar, decision items. Item number 1, 4208 BC, 182 Reade Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, this one we have to defer pending DOB's review of the FEMA issue. We had received, I'm not even sure what it was actually, something that was described by the applicant as reconsideration, but it doesn't look like the typical reconsideration from DOB. There is no rationale by the examiner. It just has just says resolved by plan examiner, permit issue 10/8/14. It doesn't mean anything to us. We can't tell whether they actually considered the FEMA issue, so we need that to be elaborated upon or go back and get more. Okay. Okay. Anybody else on this? No.
Item number 2, continued hearings, 31806 BZ, 4905 Astoria Boulevard, Queens.
We were asked to adjourn this.
New cases, item number 3, 13193 BZ, 3743 and 3761 Nostrand Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay, so this is an application to extend the term on an automotive service station with used car and fuel sales. I note that the compliance charts state that the conditions from the pre-2006 grants were superseded by the 2006 extension of the term. However, one of the conditions on that 2006 grant was that the site comply with all of the conditions of the prior grants. So, but the compliance chart doesn't deal with those prior conditions, so it needs to be reviewed and resubmitted to cover all the conditions. Mysteriously, the statement of facts refers to a special permit. I'm not sure why. This is a variance. There were some substantial compliance letters that were issued over the years which were not provided, nor were the plans associated with them, so we actually don't know what the last approved plans were like, so those need to be submitted. And just, I know the other commissioners have been on a site visit, but just from looking at the photographs, the site is a mess. So there's broken fencing that's also decayed and collapsed. There's barbed wire that's just sort of hanging there. There's graffiti on the sidewalls. There's trash strewn around. The planting is overgrown and not maintained. So all of those things need to be taken care of before we can consider granting this. And then I note also that the last approval was for 5 cars on the lot. It was 12, reduced down to 5 by letter of substantial compliance, but the photo shows way more than 5 used cars on the lot. It maybe some of these are waiting repair. It's not at all clear how the parking arrangement is done. And it also shows stackers. Those are described on the plans as a vehicle lift, but I thought a vehicle lift is something you use to repair a car. Those just look like stackers to store more cars. So that's just additional parking. So either the parking conditions comply with the approved plans, or the application has to be amended and apply for whatever is required and clarify what the parking conditions are.
Yes, it's a very crowded site. I'm not sure whether we have approved or the board had approved the storage of sort of junked cars, and I think that they need to explain exactly what's happening on the site. There's just too many cars. There's a whole lot of activity, and I don't understand the stackers either. That those weren't lifts. Those were, I think, were stackers. So, okay.
I question whether the site still sells gas, because in all the photos, there's cones around the gas islands. So I think maybe they've lost the ability to sell gas, or I'm not sure. And they have, a tent structure, which wasn't on the approved plans. They're saying they want to put in a second lift. Meanwhile, the prior extension of term told them they had to get rid of the first lift, and now they want to put in a second one. So there's a lot of things to correct in the site.
Okay. And also there's that container that I don't know if that
I think
was
the
shown.
container might have been on the prior approved plans.
Okay.
But that
It's not clear what's in the container or what to use
Yeah.
it
Right.
for.
A graffiti, I mean, you can't, there's so many things, it's,
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with the other commissioners, but I also think that they need to have a site plan that reflects their operational plan, and they really need to stick with it so that there's order to the site.
Appeals calendar, item number 4, decisions, 113-14A, 86 Bedford Street, Manhattan.
That's yours.
Do you have the smart reading ability?
Oh, I have to
you
actually
have to-
leave while you talk.
Yeah.
This is decision for,
Close the door.
this appeal for revocation of a permit issued that allows a non-conforming use eating and drinking establishment. The appellant, and we had submissions from the appellant and I guess DOB as well. And the issue still is whether or not we would accept that DOB's, I guess, authority over the site in terms of repair and the emergency declaration fit into the rubric of government intervention or the inability of the applicant or the owner to be able to proceed without government oversight, which then made it so that he extended over the 2-year discontinuance. Do we have any questions or issues concerning what was submitted or?
no, I don't have any further questions. I think the foundation system and the series of buildings, the work that had to be done was complicated, and I think they explained all the process, all the steps in the original case of how they had to proceed.
Commissioner Otley Brown, do you have any?
No, I agree. I am firmly convinced by DOB's argument.
Okay, I think we're good.
Okay.
Item number 5, 192-14A through 198-14A. This is Winslow Place, Staten Island. This is a GCL 36.
Okay, number, sorry, which one is this? One?
5.
5, what's the
Winslow
number?
Place. 192 to 198,
Oh, 'cause
14A.
it's- I don't have that order, sorry. One 192. Not at all. Sorry. Can you take over? Can't find it.
I actually have a different order.
Yeah, I have a totally different order.
The lineup was, there was an
This
error in the
was
lineup when we
inserted.
revised it. Yeah.
Well,
Right.
the fire department last time had, they had to send us something in writing. The applicant had said this is a record street of a certain width. And so the fire department concurred that since it's a record street, they don't have to widen the road. And since all the buildings are sprinklered, they have no further
Oh,
objections.
it's that one. Okay, yes, okay, right. And I don't think we had any other issues with
No,
that, right?
right.
Okay. Apologies, thanks. Okay.
Continued hearing items, item number 6, 166-12A, 638 East 11th Street, Manhattan, and item number 7, 107-13A, 638 East 11th Street, Manhattan, requesting an adjournment, and
Yes.
the building department has agreed to the adjournments for both.
Right, okay.
Okay, that's to March 31st, I don't know if that's the date you want to give. Item number 8, 1114A through 1414A, 4704, 4706, and 4708, 198th Street, Queens.
Okay. Okay, so this is kind of a complicated one. They did revise their application to include a GCL 36 waiver to address the issue of inadequate frontage on an inaccessible street, an accessible street. But as there are only pavers and not a building being installed on the map street, no GCL 35 waiver is required. They also provided another set of very confusing drawings, in fact, a lot of very confusing drawings for unknown reasons to it, in an attempt to show the effect of the current regulations on the property. What I saw was that the reason for having so many drawings seemed to be that the architect couldn't figure out whether this is a corner lot or an interior lot, so submitted 2 of each. Since this is an application for a GCL 36 waiver and a prior application, or say the Department of Buildings 2005 application assumed there was going to be a street there. It's obviously a corner lot, so those other interior lot drawings are unnecessary. But in trying to understand on that one drawing, what are the effects of the new zoning regulations on the previously approved set of drawings, the drawings that were approved in 2005. I understand that the 2008 change to 23-862 imposed a 30-foot distance from the rear wall of the building, of multiple buildings or building segments to the side lot line, and that complying with that would require substantial demolition of 2 buildings. But one of the things that's very confusing to me is that in 2008, there was 2386 and 23861, which applied to this lot, which has 4 units, and required a minimum distance of 15 feet from legal windows to the lot line, and this doesn't have it. So I don't understand how this application, or how the 2005 project complied with zoning with respect to that. Also, I think there's a rear yard problem because since it was always a corner lot, there's a section of that's beyond 100 feet of the corner. That becomes an interior lot, at which point you need a 30-foot rear yard, which the 2005 drawings don't have. And there was some response from the materials from the applicant that said, well, that neither of those things actually applied in 2005 or 2007, but in fact, it's always been an interior lot. That rule has not changed. It didn't change as a result of the key terms revisions in 2011. Those were intended to clarify certain unusual conditions, and an interior lot past a corner lot has always been the case. Ditto, in 2011, the definition of building changed with key terms, where most of the time, buildings that are abutting on a zoning lot would no longer be considered a single building. But prior to 2011, buildings abutting on the same zoning lot were a single building. So though the 2011 text change with respect to 2383 and 23831 now makes it clear that it still applies to abutting buildings on the same zoning lot. It always applied to abutting buildings on the same zoning lot because those were considered one building. So I actually am concerned that this project doesn't even comply with 2005 regulations or 2008 regulations, or prior to 2008. And then really the applicant's architect really needs to take a look at this, and if necessary, the Department of Buildings will need to review this question. And then in terms of the engineering report, I'll just note one thing, that there was a letter from the engineer that states there are no cracks in the foundations, accompanied with photographs that show cracks in the foundations. It was a very strange submission. Any other comments?
I had concerns about the engineering report. It talks about that there's been some deterioration in the buildings, and doesn't speak about, there's evidently a lot of sort of water seepage, and doesn't speak about whether or not there's mold problems or anything that water would lead to. So there's no recommendation actually for, what the process is for sort of fixing these things, and what the level of deterioration there really is. They just kind of mention these items, but they don't tell us exactly what's wrong with the building, or the extent of the deterioration. So I had just had questions about the report, that it wasn't complete.
Anybody else? No?
Okay, item number, Item number 9, 12814A, 47 East 3rd Street, Manhattan.
This
Madam
one I
Chair.
recuse also.
Yes. So we've received several submissions, and I will ask, start it with Commissioner Otley Brown. Do you have comments on the submissions that we've
Well,
received so far?
Yes, based on the submissions, I feel like there are still some weaknesses in the appellant's argument. I had raised a point at the last hearing that I would like to see the appellant address the difference between the terms parking and loading and how it's addressed in the zoning resolution. And I found that they really didn't address that issue in their responses. However, I felt the Department of Buildings actually did a good job of addressing the differences in focusing in on how loading was generally used to discuss the movement of goods and materials into commercial establishments, and that parking was used in conjunction with discussing people movement around a site. And so I would want to see the appellant address that issue, because I think that's pretty significant. And then it goes to my second point about the weaknesses in the appellant argument, in that they really don't, given that information, don't really prove to me that loading is customarily found with medical offices of this size. In fact, they do give us examples of various C of Os where there is loading, where there are medical offices, but there are also commercial establishments within the same building and also offices within the same building, and there's no connection of the loading to the medical office. So I really believe that that loading is in connection in the movement of goods and materials into the commercial establishments. So I'm not convinced by what the appellant has to say. However, I also feel that Department of Buildings has some weaknesses that they need to address, in that when they talk about forming a policy, they really need to form a policy that's very clear and transparent and sets a standard that could be implemented, that people can understand when you address a loading zone and whether or not it's customarily found in conjunction with the medical office. They talk about how size matters in terms of the percentage of space and the ratio. However, DOB really isn't clearly articulating a standard regarding that. They're basically saying, well, you have to take things on a case-by-case basis, and we'll know it when we see it. And I don't think that's a good way to implement policy, because it becomes arbitrary. It's open to basically whoever has the most persuasive argument, and to me, that's only going to lead them down the path to potential corruption and abuse of that kind of a standard. So I really feel that DOB has to come back to us with, if they feel that there is a percentage threshold that's going to throw something from accessory into primary use, they have to articulate that, and they have to make a 5-borough standard that could be applied here to provide clarity to the public.
Commissioner Montanez?
Well, I think you put it pretty well. I still was confused about why is this being called a loading berth? Could the applicant live with a parking space, and why couldn't they classify it as a parking space? Because DOB seemed to think that they might be more amenable to a parking space than a loading berth. And is there anything in the zoning resolution that would prevent a parking space? And in addition, the applicant gave us some idea of how the patients would be moving from the loading berth to the doctor's office, but I wasn't really quite clear about how the whole basement level operated. It seemed to me, in that interaction with the residential, because it seemed that they were both using the same elevator, and I didn't see how one use was separated from the other. So if they could bring, I would like them to bring like a big plan that they could answer questions using for the basement level on the ground floor, the first floor, in terms of how these two uses interact. And then the DOB came up with a new set of criteria to determine accessory use, which seems pretty thorough. So, but it's something new. So I guess we should discuss that, and maybe the applicant could respond to that.
I would have to agree about the elevator and access to the elevator. I had a question about that, and perhaps DOB could speak to this, whether or not that elevator, if it were not accessible on the level of which you'd get off on the loading berth level, if that was not accessible to residential. Would it make a difference if that entire area was just totally inaccessible to residential and only the medical office use could utilize that area? I also was interested if the standard is the New York Botanical case, which says that size and scope of these structures, and one could read spaces, must be based on individualized assessment of need. This might take into account sort of the particularities of this type of doctor. And granted, DOB sort of had to agree that one would want to look at spinal surgeons in particular, but without sort of, I guess, a critical mass of spinal surgeons to compare to. They look to a broader category. But I'm interested to know whether or not the New York Botanical case would speak to the fact that if you're looking at something so particularized and a use that is so individual, that perhaps for DOB this is sort of a case of first impression. So what do you do about that? Do you then have to look at that use and come up with, sort of a standard for that particular use, and does that make a difference? I understand that, we want to sort of broaden it and look at bigger categories, but what if you're faced with something that is so particular? It would be also interesting to find out whether or not this doctor receives patients, say 80% or 70% of them are by ambulette, which might make a difference in how those patients are received into the building. And I agree, we sort of need maybe larger plans and plans that are a little easier to read to be able to understand exactly how that operation works. And I agree, I think we need to have a little more information about why each side believes this is a parking space or wouldn't be a parking space, because I was thinking, why just not ask for a parking space for the medical office, which would make sense. So in any case, I think we've got some work to do.
Also, I don't believe that the doctor who's going to inhabit this space has loading areas with his other offices. So if he doesn't have loading zones in his other offices, I'd like to know the percentage of people who arrive by ambulance and how that is addressed at the other sites.
Great. We've covered it. I can ask Marjorie to come back in.
Okay.
Ready? Item number 10, 18040A, 332 West 44th Street, Manhattan.
They requested an adjournment on this.
So we'll hear this on March 3rd.
Well, we'll check this calendar, but,
No,
yeah.
already March 3rd. Item number, zoning calendar, item number 11, decision items, 7811BZ and 3312 through 3712A, 78-70 Winchester Boulevard, Queens.
This one, we have to defer decision. We're still waiting for DEP sign-off.
Item number,
Any other comments on this, though? No? Okay.
item number 12, 32713BZ, 1504 Coney Island Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay. With this one, they submitted a much, much clearer parking analysis with backup information about every assumption, which I really appreciated because now we know what it all means. That included a letter from the parking consultant describing the automated system that manages the number of spaces available by user types. They've committed to having a no left turn sign onto Avenue L to prevent traffic buildup at that intersection, and to reach out to DOT to assess controls that could alleviate the traffic conditions. Any other comments on that? So I think I'd be willing to approve on condition that they comply with those promises of no left turn sign on Avenue L and outreach to DOT.
Item number 13, 11714BZ, 101 West 91st Street, 139 West 91st Street, 114 to 124 West 92nd Street, Manhattan.
Okay, so with respect to this one, we do have LPC and DEP sign-off, and I'm just going to note that the approval will be conditioned on a number of things, which I'll just sort of summarize really quickly. Obviously that the building will comply with the submitted drawings. There's a maximum height of 47'2" on 92nd Street, a maximum apex height for the supports at the turf of 81'1", maximum street wall height for supports of 60 feet, a minimum distance between the street line and the netting of 3 feet, minimum distance of 30 feet from Trinity House to the turf netting, a minimum distance of 50 feet from Trinity House to the first structural support, and a minimum distance of 20 feet from Trinity House to the wall that separates the turf level from Trinity House. There's other conditions. Hours of operation of the turf are sunrise to sunset with no lighting other than emergency lighting, no permanent sound amplification, with temporary amplification limited to 9:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m., no air horns, that they should take care with respect to the buildup of ice and snow on the roof and netting, a minimum of 106 parking spaces in the garage, that they need to institute a traffic management plan to avoid the buildup of chaos on the street that we've seen in images, that the limits on delivery schedules will be Monday to Friday 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. and Saturday, Sunday 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. They will request from DOT an extension of the no parking zone times, that the school also will ensure that the garage does not become a traffic nuisance, that there's no parking or standing at any time on sidewalks, and include in the terms of the garage, and include terms in the garage lease to enforce all of this, that two-axle trucks should have their deliveries limited to the avenue instead of the side street, which is one of the main sources, it seems, of traffic buildup. They will request from DOB an approval to allow Trinity House's tenants to access that terrace roof, and they'll work with the tenants to maintain furnishings and plantings and finished materials on that terrace roof, and maintain and replace the materials in the areas that are visible around the Trinity House loggia. There's sort of cages and things that are deteriorated, and that they will install on the interior of the building a refrigerated trash disposal area that is sufficient to handle all of the decayable waste, but all trash is to be stored on the interior of the building and taken to the street only immediately before pickup. That's an important addition that will alleviate a lot of the nuisance that's been sort of imposed upon the neighbors. Any other comments on this? No. So those would be the conditions for grant. Okay.
Madam Chair, I believe you said two-axle trucks. I think you meant more than two axles.
More than two. Okay, sorry. How many axles does a truck have?
Some have two, and lots have more.
No, the typical box truck has
Right.
two?
The two.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Item number 14, 17714BZ, 1038 Flatbush Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay, this one, they revised the okay, this one I didn't have any other issues. They revised their materials a while ago. I'm not sure what the holdup was. Anything else? No.
Continued hearing items, item number 15, 30-12BZ, 14241 Roosevelt Avenue, Queens. They've asked for an adjournment for 6 weeks.
Yes.
Item number 16, 34312BZ, 570 East 21st Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. So we have the LPC sign-off. We have a ZRD1 from November from the Department of Building, which was based on a full submission of plans and a description of the use, which states that the classrooms, administrative offices, and therapy rooms are a use group 3A school. but that the sleeping rooms are use group 3A dormitories. And so that's part of the reason for their coming here, because dormitories are not permitted as of right in an R12. There's also an email from City Planning in April that has a detailed explanation of the project and agrees with the DOB's determination, and a follow-up letter in June of 2014 where DCP confirms its April analysis. And then I just note that a dormitory cannot, there's, the opposition is claiming that it's not a dormitory, that it's a nursing facility, but I note that a dormitory cannot be classified as such without an affiliated educational institution. So the fact that DOP calls it a dormitory also goes to their agreement that there's a school operated on the site. So, and then there's also a 2012 Board of Regents provisional charter grant to the school. The applicant statement of facts and the addenda show the difference between the proposed school and a pediatric nursing facility that has accessory education. They provided plans for Ditmas Park's pediatric ventilator facility, which I believe is located across the street, and compared it, where you can understand easily then the difference between those two types of facilities. Ditmas has 40 ventilator beds on a floor, 20 of which are for children, and the accessory areas include an open dining area and play area that's not separated from adults, so obviously everyone shares, and one classroom, one music room, and one multi-purpose room. So the proportion of educational area to rooms is much less than the proposed, which has approximately 1.5 floors devoted to educational uses. So from my perspective, it's clearly a school with affiliated dormitory space. Also, just note that the applicant has discussed in the submissions and during the hearing process that the CPC special permit findings, it has discussed during the hearing process the CPC special permit findings as if this were a pediatric nursing facility, and the facility meets those findings, which consider the facility's bulk landscaping, traffic generation, and impact on neighborhood support services. And the applicant in this last submission provided, thankfully, very good summaries of that stack of articles on schooling of disabled children that was provided at the last hearing. So that makes it a lot easier to explain, to understand. And then in terms of some questions about this last submission, there was a traffic analysis done where they came up with 2 visitor trips per day for 20 children. And I'd like some backup. Where's 2 trips? I mean, don't parents visit their children more often than once I don't know what? So that was a little hard to understand. If you have such a disabled child, I would think you would visit them more. And not a disabled child, you would visit them more. So one of the things, though, we did request some other things at the 1216 hearing, which we have not received. We asked for a plan showing street trees and planting. We asked to explain how this program fits between the concept of homeschooling and public school continuum. Those articles that were provided did actually study a lot about how there is kind of no choice in between. The child is either in the hospital or at home being schooled, or somehow well enough to be schooled in public school system with ventilators that are portable. And so we need an explanation of, like, where does this fit? Is this filling that gap between homeschool and public school? Because if it is, that makes sense to me, but it wasn't described. And then also, the applicant was asked to explain why the reduced rear yard won't negatively impact the neighbors, and also, most importantly, to show the programmatic needs on the drawings and statement of facts with respect to those classrooms, to establish the need for the functions. So there are 4 classrooms, there are a certain number of multipurpose rooms and therapy rooms. We were never given the explanation for why this many of each of those things, because if you could reduce some of those things, then you wouldn't need as many waivers. So that's still missing, and we really need that. Anything else? Cover it for me? Nope. Okay, thank you.
Item number 17A-14BZ, 1824 East 22nd Street, Brooklyn.
We were asked to adjourn this to 3/24, March 24th.
Item number 1841-14BZ, 21 to 37 Waverly Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay, we were asked to adjourn this first. First, we were asked to adjourn this to March 24th, and then we received a submission on Friday. So it's too late to review a submission that's received on Friday, so we'll adjourn to 3/24.
Item number 1964-14BZ, 1320 East 23rd Street, Brooklyn.
And also, we'll adjourn this one to 3/24.
Item number 94-14BZ, 1150 East 22nd Street, Brooklyn.
And adjourning this one also to 3/24.
Item number 21-146-14BZ, 285 Grand Street, Manhattan.
Okay. The applicant submitted a noise vibration study that this is a CrossFit. Becoming like Band-Aid. It's a CrossFit gym. So, of course, they were of heightened alert here because they admit that they're dropping weights of 185 pounds, and not clear how many do it at the same time. But they submitted a criterion noise vibration study that shows the 185 pound weight drops are not perceptible in the restaurant above or at 87 Eldridge, which is actually quite a sensitive receptor. It's a museum. So, but they don't provide any details or specs on the walls or flooring assemblies or the thickness of the rubber mat. And I find it actually hard to believe that vibrations from repeated or simultaneous weight drops directly on an unisolated concrete floor would not cause some sort of structural vibration. And I'm not, by any means, an expert on vibration testing, but the images show that there, first of all, shows a weightlifter standing on the step foundation that's adjacent to 87 Eldridge. So you'd think you're dropping it on the foundation, which is shared essentially by just the adjacency of those walls with 87 Eldridge. And then the images of the testing show the vibration monitors were placed on the floors. But it would seem to me for the structure-borne vibration with respect to Eldridge, shouldn't it have been on the walls? I mean, don't know.
You usually put them on the floors.
Okay.
But the criterion representative did have a couple of recommendations, and it wasn't clear whether they were going to implement the recommendations.
Like dropping it on the pads?
No, yeah, they can ask the adjacent neighbor, well, do you feel these vibrations? And they say, well, if they feel the vibrations, then they should use these pads. You know, that's something that they can implement. And also with the noise limiter on the sound system. So I think the recommendations should be followed.
Okay, yes, okay.
And they should consult with the adjacent neighbor to see if they can feel or hear the weight drops.
Okay. Okay. The adjacent neighbor actually issued a letter of opposition. That's how we know it's a museum. But it's not like they were present for the vibration testing.
Right. But I think the gym is in operation,
Yes,
so, I mean,
you would be able to
Yes,
run
they
this
would
all
know.
day long, yes. Okay. Okay, and then also, the plans were revised to show the accurate extent of the gym with the elevator access at the first floor. Any other comments? No? Okay.
Item number 22-169-14BZ, 325 Avenue Y, Brooklyn.
Okay. So this is a super complicated case, and I just have to say that the submission this time was much, much better than it was the first time. We were almost at the place where it should be if you were actually making an initial submission. So we've made progress. But there are still kind of a zillion questions. With respect to the automotive uses located directly across from the site, since these uses may have a significant effect on students' safety and air quality, DOB and DEP will be reviewing, should review the construction and window assemblies to determine whether they are sufficient. The statement of facts states how the walls are constructed in text, which I find kind of odd, but there's no details of the construction assemblies with specifications for anyone to actually be able to understand this, who knows how to read drawings. So so the applicant needs to submit the construction details and specs, and we can submit that to DEP for review to see whether it can satisfy concerns about noise and air quality. The photos that were submitted of something were not legible. They were submitted, I think, to show the efficiency of the walls, but they weren't legible in any way. You can't tell whether the walls are going to be efficient from a picture. The plans were also amended to show 40 spaces for the PCE, and also shows curbside drop-off and pickup area for 6 buses in 225 feet and 6 bicycle parking spaces along the side yard. That's good. The statement of facts were corrected to show that the Interforce facility at 1181 East New York Avenue has 500 children, not 1,000 as was originally stated, and they have another facility with 40 children. So actually, having 700 children is something that is new to this operator, and so hence another reason for us to be concerned about the size of the facility and to be really carefully scrutinizing this. The statement of facts continues to state that there's a rooftop recreation area, but there's plans to show that it's been eliminated. I understand the rooftop rec area is back in. So then the plans have to be amended again to reflect that, if that's the case. Not to mention the fact that the elevator must go to the roof in order to do that. And then we have this issue about safety for the children if we have air quality issues, noise issues, all that, how they're going to deal with that on the roof. The schedule that was provided with statement of facts says there's a staggered outdoor play from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And it states that the kids stay in their rooms all day, except they go to the multipurpose play area and field trips. So the multipurpose rooms are interesting because they can only accommodate a maximum of 70 people at one time. And so if you were staging this with 700 kids, if you do the math, I think you need like a few days to get through your playtime. And I don't think you're allowed to have 45 children in the room in any case. So it might take a week to get through your playtime with just those 2 multipurpose rooms. So I assume that the roof then is intended to compensate for that. I understand for the field trips, they're going to be walking to the West Park Playground on Avenue Y and West 1st Street. I'm just asking what kinds of air quality issues are there air quality issues related to the kids walking or being taken to that park? Perhaps you're already in a residential district and you can argue because it's residential, everybody's living sort of near that air quality condition, but it's still something that needs to be reviewed. Let's see. The biggest problem that I'm finding is we actually asked the applicant to supply a copy of the health code that, I think it's Article 47 of the health code that deals with children's services, and were provided one page. So I found it myself, and now I have cut and pasted the sections that apply to this facility, and I understand much better what's allowed, what's not allowed. And one of the biggest things is childcare service, which is what is being provided here, is defined as any program providing childcare for 5 or more hours per week for more than 30 days in a 12-month period to 3 or more children under the age of 6. Then it says, no child care provided above the 3rd floor. So we know that even the 5-year-olds are under the child care service list, and there's a 4th floor with 5-year-olds. So there is a way around that. It says that except that the Department of Child Care Services may allow child care services to occupy spaces above the 3rd floor where the Department of Buildings and the Fire Department has approved such use and the I think it's really the Board of Health, has approved the applicant or the permittee's evacuation plan. So we actually can't have this facility on the 4th floor without these special approvals. So we're kind of in this stuck place without those special approvals. So that's sort of astonishing that this comes up at this point without guidance from the applicant. The other thing that we learned just recently is there's something called the New York City Bureau of Child Care Services, and what they do is they review plans and inspect the site to see that it will comply with Department of Health requirements. And as far as we can tell from the submission, there's been no outreach to this Bureau of Child Care Services to check the site's viability or to review the plans. So that also needs to be done before we can really move on with this, because we're not specialists in child care services, they are. And then, just some other little things here and there. The statement of fact states that there are 35 classrooms, as does Dr. Ellis's letter, but there are actually 37 classrooms, excluding the multipurpose rooms. There's reference to a refrigerated refuge storage area in the cellar plans, but the statement of fact refers to a refrigerated refuse storage area in the cellar, but the plans just say refuse storage, so it needs to say refrigerated. The statement of fact says, and this is another source of real concern, it says that pre-cooked food for 3 meals, which includes breakfast for the next day, will arrive from outside at 11 a.m. So if we just talk about the fact there are 700 kids, 800 including the staff, and they're receiving 3 meals on a truck, what is the size of that delivery? It's a huge delivery. It's 2,400 little boxes or something of food for that many people. Like, what is that? It sounds like a large delivery. And what's the sort of logistics of taking care of that? How will it be loaded? Will it clog up the lobby, which, by the way, is a fire exit? How do they get all of that stuff to where? Because the statement of facts also goes on to explain that the food is delivered and then distributed to the kitchen prep areas where it's prepared for distribution to the classrooms. Prep includes, though there's no cooking, prep includes food warming, peeling and cutting fruits, and putting food in bowls and placing it in boxes and placing it on carts. All of this for 2,400 meals, basically, is occurring in 2 spaces, one 210 square feet and one 244 square feet, neither of which would be large enough to hold just the storage of that stuff, much less the preparation of it. And I note, and for instance, if it's going on carts, then the carts are wheeling down the halls, going to each one of the rooms. Where are the carts stored? They're not allowed to be stored in a 5-foot wide corridor that's fire egress. So there seems to be no place to put that. And then where's the trash area for all this? You're peeling you're peeling fruits and all this stuff. Where's it go? Nothing's been planned here. This is like not a kind of, what I'm seeing is, as we ask more questions, it sounds like the programming is being invented kind of as we talk. And that's not how you plan a space. And what's confusing is this Interforce TOTS apparently works very well. And that seems like they've worked out all the kinks because it's been in operation for a while. So they should be emulating whatever system they use there, and then incorporating that into the drawings here. One facility that we looked at elsewhere actually has food prep goes on inside of each classroom, so each teacher is responsible for prepping. And there's a little kitchenette in each classroom. That might solve it, but I don't. Without understanding logistics for so many people, that's hard to know. The next thing in terms of logistics is the statement of fact states that in the morning, the children will be brought in, I assume, by parents or the matrons, and they will have to go to a receptionist and scan in their ID cards, and that there's a security guard. But the lobby isn't large enough to receive hundreds of people arriving at one time who also have to be scanned in. So what that means is significant queuing and crowding on the street with strollers and slow down on bus drop-offs, because the buses won't be able to offload until there's room on the street to put the kids. So I don't think any of that's been worked out. There's reference to something called an early and late room, where the children who can't leave as early as the rest of the kids stay, and or when they arrive too early, they come. But what's the anticipated number of early and late kids, and where are they going to be put? Because, again, I don't know, but I think you're not allowed to have more than the given number of children altogether. You can't crowd like 50 kids altogether while they're in an early or late room. I don't believe, but not being an expert in this subject, I don't know. We also would like to see a full cellar plan. We were only provided with a partial one. And in terms of solving some of these problems, we talk about looking at the kitchen prep and food storage area being put in the cellar. That's kind of an obvious place for that. And then the other thing is the classrooms. So there's Department of Health has a maximum number of 3 to 4-year-olds per class as 15, and many of these classes have 17 students in them. So that's both for the 2 to 3s and the 3 to 4s. That's not permitted. So again, not sure what's going on. What it tells me is the rooms are very large and in disproportionately large for the number of kids that are going to be in each room, and that therefore the building is probably very inefficiently laid out, and you could satisfy a lot of these issues if it was laid out better. And then, let's see, I think that's it for me. Sorry to go on.
Next. I think you covered most of my issues, maybe with just a couple of additions. I would like to see a plan of the entire cellar, not only to see what is actually down there and see if it might impact anything to do with the school and the kids, but also is there the opportunity for them to utilize the cellar perhaps for that recreation space that they probably really need? And would that benefit the kids better if it was sort of indoors? They wouldn't have to worry about inclement weather or being exposed to any noise or air quality issues on the roof. So is there the ability to utilize that cellar more efficiently and maybe gain some space there? I also had still had questions about how the kids move from the school to go to the park. And they don't really describe whether or not they need to have maybe some enhanced sort of DOT features that might help them do that. Are there enough stop signs? Is there, what happens at intersections? And I think we typically ask facilities of this nature for that kind of information if they're moving the kids around. So I think we have to take a look at that. And I too had questions about how you kind of get all of the crush of children in and scan them in a very small lobby area. And does that mean that the kids actually stay on the bus until they're ready? Does that have implications for idling and that sort of thing? So those were I think my open issues. And just in general, they have a successful operation already, and I think it would be helpful if they were to look at that operation and compare it to what they're planning on doing here. And then they would be able to say, it's been our experience, we have X amount of kids, we do it like this, it works because we have the data that shows that it's working, and we just transpose it to a new site. I agree, it's kind of like they're just answering our questions without sort of giving us the bigger picture and the overview of what we're really looking for. So.
Yes.
I have 2 questions that were not mentioned previously that address the definding. The applicant talks about the bus unloading and loading procedure, but they're really only detailing the bus unloading in the morning, and they need to address the bus loading in the afternoon, because of course that's going to differ. And then my second question has to do with the parking. Since the parking that's on site is used by the PCE, is this site generating any other parking? And if so, is it going to be accommodated somewhere else because it can't be accommodated on site?
Okay.
I had a question regarding the age range and the number of students in each class, and there were discrepancies between the director's letter and the statement, and the schedule of classes in the statement didn't agree with what was laid out in the plans, most specifically regarding ages 3 and 4 on the second floor. If you add up all the occupancy on the plans, you come to a little bit over 200, but in the statement, they're saying there's 314 students on the second floor. So I still didn't quite see how they fit 700 students in the school.
Right. Okay. And then just for tomorrow's hearing, Dr. Ellis should attend, and I'd like to have the architect attend and not have it be the building owner who seems to be, I don't know, representing the architect, but it needs to be the architect. That's the person who signs and seals the drawings and takes responsibility. I understand in this case it's an engineer, but the person who's going to be drawing this needs to attend the hearing. Okay. Thanks.
New cases, item number 1, 9814BZ, 404 Richmond Terrace, Staten Island.
Okay. So this one is, it's described as a reestablishment of a banquet facility. I'm not really sure what a reestablishment is, but so the existing historic building, Greek Revival historic, originally a mansion, was a non-conforming use as a banquet facility / catering hall. So it did not need a variance to be operating in this R5, R3A district, but the parking area accessory to it did need a variance. So that's what actually lapsed. And then there was also a lapse of the nonconformance because of more than 2-year abandonment of the use. I note it's not in a floodplain, but you probably knew that. We do need an LPC sign-off on this. I just also note that the community board looked at this and they, I thought, reasonably requested sound attenuation measures be taken with no amplified music on the second floor, valet parking as opposed to self-park, and landscaping on all the perimeters to buffer sound, to properly locate trash storage area so as not to be a nuisance, and to direct exterior lighting away from the neighbors. The EAS has an error in it. It was identified as a type 2, but because it's in a historic district, or I think actually might be an individual landmark, it would not be a type 2, it would be unlisted. So let's see. The statement of facts states that the conforming community facility use would require gut renovation. And I'm trying to understand this analysis of what's the as of right, but it seems that you could also look at the building, which was formerly a mansion, for residential use, and I would think that these days, that where people are looking for much larger houses, and you see in the neighborhood sort of beyond that there are very large houses, seems to me actually, for a lot of reasons, that a residential analysis of the existing building would be more appropriate. One reason for that is that you're not allowed to have an as-of-right community facility used for medical without parking. So it's not that, so you would have needed a waiver for a medical office here, so it's the wrong choice. It's not an as-of-right use in this case, unless you provide parking on site, independent of the lot 31, which is the parking lot. The drawings show demolition of the interior partitions or some interior partitions in the existing building for the proposed use. And especially at the second floor. So in terms of how much demolition would be necessary for the two uses, not sure that there's a big difference between the residential conversion and the proposed in terms of making this analysis about how difficult it would be to convert back to residential use. I also wonder in terms of the proposed use, how the ADA requirements are being met. I didn't see an elevator, and since it's a new use effectively for the Department of Buildings, I think there's going to need to be an elevator. No? So it also states that Lot 31 could be developed with 4 two-family dwellings, but this is infeasible, and but it doesn't actually, and one of the reasons it's infeasible is because there's a potential for a widening of Richmond Terrace, but it's not like the plans for this, the map, the street map shows a potential widening. It's just kind of talked about. I don't know how you can use people talking about things in general as one of the difficulties. I think maybe what the real issue is that if it's shown for some reason that the residential use wouldn't be viable in the existing building, then maybe the argument would be that the existing building converted to this commercial use would not be viable without the attached parking area. And you could say the same for the community facility use. Community facility wouldn't be viable without the attached parking area. So you actually can't separate the two lots in the analysis. There's no backup drawings to make these arguments. It's just the statement of fact states that the existing building would not be suitable for a medical office due to interior layouts and entry conditions, but there's no drawings to support that. That's true also for a residential conversion. The statement of facts needs to discuss why these sites are not viable for residential use. Right. And so then the statement of facts states that all of Lot 31 is in the R3A, but the land use map actually shows it's partly in the R5, so that should be corrected. The plans also incorrectly label the existing building as 1-story. It's actually 2-story with a 1-story extension. And then in terms of the amount of parking that's being provided on site, depends on which use you actually apply. So if it's a banquet hall, it's actually a parking category D, which is a more stringent parking requirement that requires 1 space for every 8 people, which would mean 44 spaces. The C of O actually describes it as both a banquet and a catering hall. So this request for more parking is actually erring on the side of better, and they may need even more than that to accommodate the facility. So they should look at the number of seats, the number of attendants, and how many spaces that's really going to generate, because you actually may be short on parking and may need to do stackers or something else, or another kind of layout, because it's valet, so they could actually, it should be valet, so they could actually squeeze more parking in there.
I just wanted to
Yeah.
say, they should tell us what is the maximum amount of spaces they could have or cars they could accommodate with the valet. They just say they can accommodate more, but they
Yeah.
don't say it.
Okay. And then I only touch on the financials a bit because I defer to Commissioner Otley Brown for the technical stuff. But there's an assumption that the medical office can be developed without parking. Oh no, that's what I talked about already. Analysis. So okay, that's in the financials. There's an assumption the medical office can be developed without parking as of right, which is not the case. So I think that actually has to be taken out of the discussion. It keeps going on and on about how you wouldn't be able to rent this for as much because it doesn't have parking. Well, the fact is you'd have to have parking, so it has to be an analysis with parking. They should also look at other alternatives for the residential, as I've said, in the existing building. And we need, and I'm curious why also they're only looking at 4 two-family homes, which they say aren't as valuable because they're small. That's the selection they make. Why aren't there, say, 3 homes or 2 homes, whatever seems to be better for the market? That's actually what should be looked at, not something that doesn't sell that well. And then Oh, also, in terms of the resale value of the house itself, the financials downplay the potential value of an early 19th century Greek Revival building that has an early 20th century addition. This is a historic building. This is very sexy, frankly. I note that in the New York Times in 2002, Christopher Gray described the building as a noble landmark surrounded by ornamental fences decorated on the interior with murals. It has an original tin ceiling, has sweeping views of the harbor. I think the cost method of analysis is the wrong way to go here. You could sell this because it's a historic property. And then there were also, I think that the proposed use was not analyzed the way we usually look at these kinds of uses. We look at this more as hotel, sort of like it's a hotel where it's producing income, not that you would rent it to somebody. So there were no costs taken into account for finishes, furnishings, fixtures that would increase the development costs. Yes, so let's see. And I have more, but I'd actually like to hear from others. Sorry. You want to go on about the financials since we're there?
Oh, okay, all right, but quite a bit of what I say is not going to be relevant if you want them to redo the financials using different scenarios.
Yes,
So,
the
I mean-
the community facility won't work without the parking, so that has to be done, where either they get parking on the site of lot 40,
Right.
or they
Have
have to
parking
use it
somewhere.
on the other, or off-site,
Close,
or
yeah.
in the adjacent lot.
Okay, well, I really just have questions about the hard costs in terms of the medical office conversion. They state it's going to be $100 a square foot, but they really don't state what this is for, what exactly is going to be done to the site. They show us the Marshall and Swift tables, but it's not clear at all. And same thing with the proposed catering hall hard cost of $50 a square foot. They need to detail exactly how they arrived at that figure. As for the two-family home sales, I think those sales prices are low. The comps are, there's one comp that's somewhat close to the waterfront, but this is fairly waterfront property because across the road is park area that's not going to be developed. So with that kind of view, there's got to be a premium that you can only account for if you have other comps that are in that general area. I think their retail rents for the catering hall at $30 should take into account the fact that this is a landmark building used as a catering hall, which would have a premium, I believe, for renting. So I think they have to do something to show that extra
But just to
amount
go
that they
on
would
to
get.
that, normally, they're looking at this not to rent it as a catering facility, they're looking at this to operate a catering facility. So shouldn't it be looked at the way we look at hotels, where there's,
Well, actually, when you look at the hotels, because you're looking at a business, they're actually drilling out all of the business income and expenses to get to that real estate income, the income only for the real estate. So they really are just valuing the real estate in the hotel. That's why they have that whole, total income, and then they have the distributed expenses and the undistributed expenses, which goes to the residential portion, to drill down to that last bit of income, the net operating income that's really only attributable to the residential. So it's kind of like starting at that point here. The $30 a square foot is for the residential, should anybody want to lease this space as a catering hall.
but so, because you might handle things differently for a medical office, if you're renting it, you're just renting it as is. Right, normal, unless you have a tenant, a work letter or something like that, you wouldn't be doing the renovating. The tenant would.
Well, I think there's a certain amount of renovation actually that's actually done to bring that space to a clean box
Right,
sort of
okay, plain
situation
vanilla
that
box,
it
right.
isn't going to be in the state that it is right now. So that's why I
Okay.
wanted them to talk about in their hard costs what exactly they're talking about doing, because it should be what it is to clear out that interior space, I guess partially demo partitions and just make it clear white walls, basic industrial carpet floors, drop ceiling, whatever. But we need to find that out because they're not
With
addressing
original
it.
tin ceilings and murals on the wall, you're going to have a drop ceiling?
True, I know, but it's not likely that if you're going to have a medical office, that you're really going to appreciate tin ceilings. So they're going to, or murals on the wall. I think they're going to do something to vanillize it, but they should address that. I think that it's really not clear. So, but as I said, if you're calling for different scenarios, then I agree with you that we should see different scenarios.
Any other comments?
I just too agree with you on the matter of the parking. I didn't think that they calculated the parking correctly. I got a higher number. I even got a little higher number than the 44, so I'm not sure who's correct in this. They have a possibility of 250 people in the building at one time. Right. So I think they need to, one, take a look at how many spaces they can actually really fit, give us the number for valet, but then also tell us how they're going to mitigate noise, light, all of that from the parking area if all those 250 people are now exiting after the event. We've all been to big events, and we're not exactly noiseless when we leave a building. Right. So I think they need to explain how they're going to handle that. Also, perhaps give us a better idea of maybe some proposed landscaping that would shield the parking lot. I'm sure that they would probably want to do some nice landscaping in front of the building, but how are they going to handle the parking lot? And can they please put the uses, the current uses, or on the current plan of the existing plan, put the uses of the rooms. It's not clear exactly what some of those rooms were for, so that we can then compare it with what they're requesting now, and so that we can see the sizes and basic operation.
Okay, regarding the A finding, I think they need to provide a better description of the history of the two lots, especially the lot used for parking, and whether they were always used together. I note that on the 1949 CO, the catering hall is in a business district. But it's not clear what was happening on the other lot at the time. Was there ever any building on the other lot? And I think they need to concentrate more on how the two lots function together and what their history is over time.
I believe there was a building at one time on that other lot.
Well, maybe they should go
another
into
house,
that a little bit more. Let's see. Yes, I agree that they have to definitely do some noise attenuations to the rear. The site right now is actually, they should really clean it up as soon as possible. They have two large trailers parked on site for a long period of time. The site is actually full of debris, and I really don't see why they're storing tractor trailer trucks there. It's really obnoxious. There's one of the waivers that DOB gave them is actually for an expansion of the use by adding catering to the second floor. In all the prior scenarios, the second floor was only offices, and there is no ADA access, so I'm really wondering if that expansion of the use is warranted.
Oh, they could talk about that in their financials
Right.
as well, so that perhaps whether the use is viable absent the second floor.
And just as far as the waterfront, its location, it's not really in a very desirable location. It's surrounded by multiple dwellings on either side, very tall multiple dwellings. The site itself doesn't really have a residential feel to it because it's on a very heavily trafficked street, and the waterfront views they have are actually of a fuel tank farm in Bayonne and an electrical power plant.
Those are pretty sometimes.
Well, thanks for clearing that up,
Yes.
because I couldn't tell that from the
The
paperwork.
street around
so
the
that's
corner,
good.
Carroll Place, has a completely different feel. So,
Just behind it.
yes.
That's actually a lovely street.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. Okay. And then, anything else? with
No.
that? I noted also there's lack of coordination between the drawings and the statement of facts with respect to the occupancy. So the statement of facts, the drawing shows seating for 52 guests plus 2 staff on the second floor, and on the, but there's no mention of, they say, I'm sorry, the financials make reference to a waiver for parking and state there are 80 people on the second floor, but that's not what the drawings show. They only show 52 guests plus staff. And on the first floor, neither drawing shows that there are 29 seats in other rooms. Neither statement or the financials reflect the fact that there are 29 seats in the other rooms. And also in terms of rated occupancies, those are much higher, so you don't measure the parking against, I believe you measure the parking against a rated occupancy, not the proposed occupancy. Then the other thing is, the comps for the R5 parcel are much smaller than the subject parcel. So it seems to me that the adjustments on that would skew the analysis. It says the economy of scale assumption that is being made in the financials doesn't seem to be playing out with one tiny site selling at 18 square foot and another at 75 square feet. What I noticed sort of stylistically with this, and I'm aware that this is kind of someone who's just beginning to do these kind of financial analyses. So it seems like you get the comps that are all with the numbers that are all sort of in the same range, and then there's one comp that's way below all the others, so it draws down the value. The right way to be doing that is to find a whole bunch of comps and you drop out the high ones and you drop out the low ones, and then you have averages. So I don't think any of the comps are actually right because of how they are artificially skewed. And then, also the sale values of the two-family houses, most of them were very old houses, like 1910. These are going to be brand-new houses with no work to be done on them. So that's not a good comparison. And also ditto for the comps for retail rentals. They're showing these little bitty stores on kind of main streets that are typical small retail establishments. This is a mansion that you're going to be renting. I mean, that's not at all comparable. And also in terms of the cost estimates, these are computer-generated estimates that provide no information at all. We're accustomed to seeing an estimate done by an actual cost estimator who goes through each line item and accounts for all of the issues with that building. There's actually a mistake on the new building cost estimates. There are two items for each line item. So it looks like it's double counting or something, and it doesn't align with the project. I actually don't know what that cost
I was
estimate
trying
is.
to figure out whether it was separating the building between the two-story original portion and the one-story addition. That's what I couldn't figure out.
Oh,
Is
I
that
thought-
what they were trying to do? Because it had different square footages on it. They definitely need to clarify
Yeah,
that.
no, it's actually not, it's not sufficient to use a computer-generated cost estimate.
I agree with you.
Those are just done to give you a ballpark on a price. Those are not for pricing. So I think there's still a lot of work to do on this, but yeah, I think there's a lot of work to do on this. Okay.
Item number 2, 15714BZ, 1151 East 29th Street, Brooklyn.
So this is a proposal to enlarge under 73622, and you will all be astonished to hear what I say. So this is a modest two-story addition that's not visible from the street. It maintains a minimum 25-foot rear yard in a portion, and even the 39-foot rear yard for the other portion of the lot, with 6'9" side yard on one side, and even increasing the side yard on the other side for this addition to 15'3". The neighbors have similar 1- and 2-story additions at the rear, and the immediately adjacent lots have 25-foot deep yards. And the lot behind it is a park that's separated from this lot by a high wall and a very high chain link fence. I note that all the necessary materials to be able to understand this were submitted: rear yard study, rear yard and neighborhood photos, floor area study, and but it's just too bad that the statement of facts didn't refer to any of them. Time to get the statement of facts to refer to the stuff that goes in there. Urban cartographic study was a little bit funny in that it seems to be arguing in favor of a much larger addition because it's arguing there are sites in the neighborhood that are 45 feet high. I don't know why it needed to get so blustery. This is only 26 foot 7 inches high, so why do we need to care about the 40 foot high buildings? So anyway, I'm actually okay with this on the first shot. Anybody else?
I thought it was very modest. The only question I had was, I think that they need to show that there's a step or two down in the cellar plan to the addition, because I think they have it at 8.6 below grade, but the existing is at 6'2". So that was it. Otherwise,
So they could make that modification really quickly.
otherwise I had absolutely nothing to say about
Yay.
this.
Yay.
I think they need to clarify what they're asking for in terms of FAR, because the plans and the zoning analysis show .8, and the statement says .84.
Oh, I got .76 in both the statement and the plans, but maybe it's the open space ratio that's .8.
Yeah, I have .84 for the FAR, and the open space ratio is .72. That's what I
Oh.
have.
Yeah, I mean, there's some discrepancies.
Okay, obviously they need to clarify. Okay. Okay, great. Yep.
Item number 3, 17014BZ, 662 Avenue of the Americas, Manhattan, is the PCE, David Barton Gym.
Right. So this is actually the gym in the Limelight Church. So and I know it's been operating since at least September,
Yep.
something like that. I have lots of friends who go there. So it just needs to be changed to a legalization, but there is LPC sign-off and fire department sign-off. And they did describe their fire safety plan and the sound attenuation methods. And the adjoining uses are retail that's just operated during kind of very restricted retail hours. So, daytime, there are little shops and things like that. There's a restaurant. So I don't really think there are any issues with this. Anybody else? And they're not dropping weights from their shoulders of 180.
Not on purpose.
Not on purpose. And if they are, there's an ambulance nearby.
Anything else?
That's it. Good. Thank you.
This concludes the morning review session for February 23rd, 2015.